Hello, welcome to Programming Tutorial 10, Unity Animations. Today we will be using Spritesheets and animating our player in a few different ways. We will also be animating the enemies and creating transitions between each of the animations so that they can smoothly work and feel good when we're playing the game. So, let's get started. Okay, so as usual, let's open up our Unity project for our final tutorial. Okay, so we are in our Unity project, and we actually already have all of the sprite sheets that we need for all of our animations. Because here in our Mega Man one has all of the actual Mega Man sprites for his animation. So if we go into our sprite editor over here, we can see all of the different animations that we're going to need. So today we will be making idle, walk, jump, and climb, and that's it. So we're just going to name these. So these ones are already named, idle 1, 2, 3. I'm going to name these ones walk 1, walk 2, walk 3. This one I'm just going to name jump. This one I'm going to name climb. And those are the 4 that we're going to need for Mega Man. And then we're going to click apply and exit out of that one. And then we can go into our enemy spreadsheet and do the same thing for our snake and our jumper. So this one is snake. We can call it snake 1. This one we can call it snake 2, snake 3. Just make sure it's saved. Then we go to our jumper, which is down here. Jumper 1, jumper 2, jumper 3, and jumper 4. Awesome. So those are the ones we're going to need. Click apply and exit out. So now we have all of these here. If we click the little arrow beside the sprite sheet, we can see all of our new sprites that we just named. So we have climb, we have all of the idles, we have the jump, and we have walk at the bottom because it's in alphabetical order. And then in enemies, we'll have all of the enemies, and at the bottom we will have jumper 1, 2, 3, 4 and snake 1, 2, 3. Perfect. So now that we have that all ready to go, we can start actually setting up our animations. So the first thing we can do is go into our assets, and we can actually create a new folder and call it animations. Capital A, just like that. Perfect. And then we are in here. So how do we make animations? There are actually 2 different windows that we can use to create and edit animations. There's an animation window and an animator window, and they're used for different things. So it depends where we want to put it on our window, but if you want to just open it in the default location, you can click window, and then you can go to animation, and then there's these 2 over here. There's animation and animator. So another way to do it is in this bar with project and console, you should be able to right click. Oh, maybe you can't. So let's just open it with here, animation, animation, and then it opens it, and then we can actually pin it to a bar. So we can pin it to this bar if we want to. So we have this, or we can pin it to this bar. So we have it right here, which we can do. And then our project window will be in here. So how do we actually create animations? So to do it, we are going to, in our scene view or in our hierarchy, we select our player because that's who we want to create an animation for. And then in our animation window, we're just going to click create. And then a window will pop up that we can name our animations and make sure it's being saved into the animations folder that we created in our project. And let's just call it our first one idle.anim. Perfect. So we have our player idle, and then we have a timeline that pops up once we create our animation. So once it's created, we can go into our sprites and go into Mega Man, and we can find idle. So we have idle 1, 2, 3. If you hold control and click all of them, you can select all of them, and we can actually drag them into our timeline just like this, and then have it right here. And what we can do is in our scene view, we can zoom into our player, and if we play this, we'll see that he's actually doing an animation, but it's going really, really quickly. So we want to actually spread this out. So you can actually drag this out, and it will spread it out evenly and split them up. So let's say we want the idle animation to last 20 frames. We can click play. There we go. So that's still a little bit too quick. So how about we just make it all the way to 60, or a minute, or not a minute, but 1. And then we go like this. There we go. That looks decent. So as you can see right now, when we put all 3 in, the very last frame here only plays for 1 frame because it's the end, and then it goes to the beginning again. So what we can do to fix that is we can take the first frame like this, and you can copy it and then paste it, and we can drag it on to the next area like this. So if we want the end to be at 1, we can put this one at 15, this one at 30, this one at, that's okay, 45 works. Then if we click play, there we go, that's his idle. Perfect. And now that I'm thinking about it, this idle 3 actually might have been the first walk, but that's okay. We can just keep it as an idle because it still looks like an idle animation. Perfect. So we have our idle animation done, and then we can simply just create another one. So after we have our idle, we can click this little arrow here under idle and click create new clip, and then we can call it walk.anim. And then it'll create a new one, and we can do the same thing we did with idle with walk. So if we scroll all the way down, we'll have walk 1, 2, and 3, drag them in, spread them out a little bit, and copy the first frame, and copy the first frame and paste it over here, and let's see how it looks. So that's decent. It looks a little bit slow. So we can actually select all of it, and we can move it down. How about 35? There we go. That looks a little better. But we can do even better. 25. There we go. Now it's like he's actually running a little bit. Perfect. So we have our walk animation. Next, we can create our jumping animation. So we'll create new clip, call it jump.anim, and this actually only has 1 frame, so it's going to be very simple. We're just literally just going to take jump, drag it in, and that is the whole animation. If we play it, he'll be jumping. So that's what he looks like when he jumps. And then the last one we're going to need is our climb. So let's do climb.anim, drag it in, and there's our climb because it also only has 1 frame. Perfect. So we are done creating the animations for our player. The next thing we need to do is actually set them up so they work properly in our game. So what we can do now is we can go into Window, Animation, and this time we're going to open the Animator tab instead of the Animation tab, and that's going to open in here next to the Scene and Game tab. So we have the Animator, and we can click on Player in the hierarchy, and it'll show all of the player's animations. So all the ones we created, it has idle, there's a walk, there's a jump, and then there's also a climb, just like this. So we can put them in kind of like a square so they look good and it's easy to read, and we can keep it like this. Okay, so let's explain a little bit. So entry is the animation that the player will start in when the game starts. So right now the arrow is pointing to idle, which means the player is going to start in the idle animation. And right now, the player has no way to get to any of the other 3 animations here. So we need to create transitions in order for us to be able to change into those different animations. So just to keep it looking nice, I'm going to put the entry up there. I'm going to put jump on this corner, and I'm going to put walk on this corner. And now we can actually start creating our transitions. So to create a transition, first we can do from idle to walk. So we right click on walk, create, say, make transition, and then we click on idle. So that now we have a transition from walk to idle. And if we right click on idle, make transition, and click on walk, now we have a transition for both of them. So you always, for animations that can change between one another, you always need to have a transition from both to the other one. You can't just have one transition, or else, like if we just had a transition from idle to walk, we would never be able to get back from walk to idle. So that's why we need two transitions for that. So the next thing we can do to actually edit these transitions, if we go up here, we're in layers right now. If we go to parameters, we can create a new parameter to be able to change the animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this plus sign. We're going to click on bool because we want it to be a check to see if we are walking or if we are not walking. So we're going to call it walking, just like this. So we have a parameter now called walking, and we're actually going to create a few more. We're going to call in air for the jumping, and we are going to make one called climbing. Perfect. So we have those three parameters now, and what we can do is click on one of these transitions, and we got to go to our inspector window because we no longer need the animation. And when we're in the inspector window, we can see these transitions and we can edit them to be how we want. So what we want to do first is from our idle to walk transition, we want to go into the conditions section, click the plus sign, and it will add a condition for one of our parameters. So to transition from idle to walk, we want walking to be true, which it already did automatically for us. So now the condition is walking is true, and we can make it so the transition happens instantly. So up here we can turn off has exit time, and we can go into the settings, set the transition duration to 0, just like that, and then that will be good. We can move this, actually we can keep it exactly where it is. So now it has a transition from idle to walk that goes instantly once walking is true. And if we do the other transition, we'll add a new condition, but this time we're going to do walking is false. And then again, we're going to turn off exit time, and we're going to transition duration to 0, and then we are good to go. So we want the walk to end right when it idles. So this, having transition duration to 0 and having no exit time, will make it so it instantly transitions to idle as soon as walking is false. So right now we have those two transitions, and to actually be able to try it out, what we can do is we can put the Animator tab up here and make it a little bigger, and we can put in play mode, in game mode. So right now he's in idle, and if we turn walking on, he's going to be walking. If we turn it off, he's going to go back to idle. So right now in code, we don't actually have a way of setting walking to true. So that's what we're going to be doing next, is we're going to actually be setting these variables in code when the player is walking or climbing or is in the air. But right now we can change it in the Animator tab just to test it out, which is good. And we haven't created transitions for these yet, so they won't do anything. Awesome. So we can exit play mode, bring the Animator tab back here, move this to be a little smaller, and we can continue by creating the rest of the transitions, and then we can go into code and actually make sure they work. So to continue creating these transitions, let's make a transition from idle to jump. Let's make a transition from jump to idle, and let's do it from jump to climb and from climb to jump. Let's make one from walk to climb, and we need to make one from jump to walk and walk to jump. Perfectly. So that is all of the transitions that we need to make right now, and then we can actually edit them to be how we want. So we can click on the transition from idle to jump, add a condition, and do in air is true, and this one's going to be in air is false. And again, we can turn off exit time, transition duration to 0, and then in here, turn off exit time, transition duration to 0, just like that. So sometimes when you make transition duration 0, if one of the animations is really short, such as the jump, because it's only 1 frame, it'll give you this warning. It says, difference in effective length between states is too big, transition preview will be disabled. So if you want to be able to see the preview, you just make it a little bit bigger, so like 0.1, and then you can change it yourself. So if you want to make it like really small still, you can still make it small, and then it'll work. So you want idle to jump just like that. Perfect. So we have our jump to idle and idle to jump working nice. Now we can do walk to climb. And the walk to climb one, we are just going to go, can't scroll down, to conditions. Set climbing is true. Exit time, nothing. Transition, 0.01. Perfect. So that works for me as well. And then we can do the climb to jump and the jump to climb. So jump to climb, we are just going to make climbing true. Turn off exit time. Again, 0.01. And then climb to jump, we are going to make climbing false and in air true. Then climb will go to jump, and then exit time is off, 0.01 transition duration. And which ones haven't we done? We haven't done jump to walk yet, or walk to jump. So our walk to jump transition is going to be if in air is true. That's all we need. Turn off exit time, 0.01. And our jump to walk, we are going to do if walking is true and if in air is false. And then we can turn off exit time, 0.01 transition duration, and that should be all of them. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Perfect. So we have all of our transitions done. So once you get used to making them, they become pretty easy to make transitions between them. The hard part is actually doing it in the code and making it so it works properly in the code. So let's do that part next. So the first thing we're going to do is, if we go into our scripts, go into our player, we can create a new script and call it AnimController. And it's normally a good idea to make a script just to have all your animations in there and to do all of the animations in one script, just so you know where it all is and it's easy to control. So we can open that, and then we can get started by creating this script. And we're going to do the script first, so some of the functions we're going to call aren't going to exist yet, but we are going to make the functions and make it so it does work. So don't worry about it if there are errors right at the beginning, because we will fix them as we go. So the first thing we need are a few variables. So we're going to do an animator, anim. Make sure it's not animation, it's an animator. And then we are going to call player controller and call it player movement. And then we are going to do player and call it player. So those are the 3 variables that we need. And then in our start function, we're actually going to set those variables. So we're going to do player equals get component, player. We are going to do anim equals get component animator. And the last one, we're going to do player movement equals get component. Oops, I put a 0 in that one. This one is going to be player controller. Awesome. So we have our 3 variables and we have them being set in our start function. And now we can fill out our update function. And that is actually all we need to do in here after we fill out the update function. So in here, we're going to have a few if statements. to actually set our parameters from our animator. So we're going to do an if statement, and inside the first one, we're going to do if player movement dot get is walking, which we haven't created yet, so there will be an error, but don't worry about that. And then inside, we're going to do anim dot set bool, which is a new function. And this is how you actually, this function is how you set a parameter from the animator. So we're going to do set bool, and inside it takes two parameters in it. So the first one is the name of the animator parameter that we created. So we're going to do walking, and we're going to set it to true, just like that. So if I go back into Unity now, and I go into Animator, what that's doing is it's setting this walking bool to true in the case that it is walking, just like that. So, and then under that we can do an else like this, and then we can just set this to false. So that is actually how you set parameters. And when you're doing it, make sure the name is exactly the same. Again, it's the same thing with the tags. It needs to be, it's case sensitive, and you can't have any extra spaces or anything, or it will not work. It needs to be exactly the same name. And then under that, we can do another if statement and do if player movement dot get is grounded. And then we can again take this, and instead of walking, we're going to set in air to false. And we can do an else, copy paste, in air is going to be true, and then we can just copy paste this whole thing for the third one, which is going to be climbing. So it's going to be player movement dot get is climbing, just like that. And this is called climbing and climbing. And this one is true. This one is false. Perfect. So that is all we need to do in our AnimController script. And then in our player controller script, we're going to need to actually create all of these functions now. So if we open up our player controller scripts now from before, we can actually start creating these functions. So what we can do first is we already have an is grounded and an is climbing boolean. So we can create another one for is walking, just so we can send it through to the animator. So we have those three, and then we can create our functions to return them. So right at the very bottom with our get speed, we can do a public bool get is walking, and in there we can return is walking, just like that. And then we're going to simply do the same thing for is grounded and is climbing. So we can copy paste, paste, and paste. This is going to be get is climbing, and it's going to return is climbing. This is going to be get is, what was the last one? Grounded. And then it's going to return is grounded, just like that. So we have those three functions now that return all of those three things. And then for is walking, is climbing and is grounded is already being set in our code from before, like this, for example, is climbing and is grounded in our collision checks. But is walking is never being set as of right now. So to do that, we simply just go up to our walking function, wherever it may be, right here, and then we just go in here and we just set is walking to true, and then here is walking to true, just like that. And then under this, what we can do is do a third if statement to check if we aren't walking. So we're going to do if exclamation mark input dot get key, key code dot a, and another exclamation mark input dot get key, key code D, and in here we are going to set is walking to false. So what this check does is it does exactly what you think it does. If we are not pressing the A key and we are not pressing the D key, otherwise known as we are not walking, just set is walking to false. And that's all we need to do there to set is walking to true and false. And everything else should be working completely fine. And then if we go into our game now, we should see that the animations are working. So let's go into our project. Just wait for it to load. Go back into our scene view. We got to put our AnimController onto our player first before it actually ends up working. Let's check it's on here, AnimController. And then if we click play, it should work. So let's try it out. Click play. And right off the bat, we should be doing our idle, which is right. If we walk, our walk animation will play. We don't have a shoot animation, so when we shoot, it's just going to play whatever animation is playing at the time. If we jump, our jump animation will play perfectly fine. And let's go check if our climbing animation is going to work once we get to the ladder. Just got to beat the level. Boom, boom. And if we jump on this ladder, perfect. We are climbing now. And we can move back and forth on the ladder like this. And then we can go to the next area and fight these guys as well. Awesome. So the animations work. That's perfect. So let's exit play mode. And actually, I just noticed one thing. If we're here right now and we fall off the ladder, oh, never mind, it did work. It was just glitching for a second. If we fall off the ladder the last time, it stayed in our climb animation, but it didn't do it this time. So that is okay. And it actually does work. So we can exit play mode. And that is actually everything that I needed to show you for today. So you learned how to create the animations, and we added them onto our player using our AnimController in our code. So that's all for this week, and let's get into the recap portion.